Hey guys, it's me, and today I have another really crazy story for you all. This story comes from a Reddit user. They were exploring an abandoned house with a friend when they found something that neither of them expected. The details are pretty graphic, so I'll just jump right into it. My friend and I were exploring an abandoned home. We'd been exploring abandoned buildings for years, and this was one of the scariest ones yet. We didn't know what to expect when we first opened the door. It looked like a tornado had ripped through the place and dumped all of its contents back into itself. There was debris everywhere, but it was well-organized chaos. You could tell that each room had its own individual personality, so you could picture the lives that unfolded within those four walls. We noticed straight away that every single clock in the house was frozen at 3:17 a.m., but not in an ET phone home kind of way. They were actually stuck in the position they would be in if the hands were made of liquid metal and the clock was turned off right before we walked in. All of the clocks were frozen in place like this. It felt really weird, like something out of a horror movie. We made our way deeper into the house and we started finding more and more bizarre things. Like the dining room table had a meal on it that looked like it had just been placed there. The plates were still steaming and the food smelled like it had just been cooked. One of the chairs was pulled out like someone had just got up from it. A newspaper was on the table as if it had just been delivered. It was dated the next day. There was a TV in the living room with a program guide open to the next day as well. The radio in the kitchen was tuned into a local station that wasn't even broadcasting anything anymore. There was a piano in the corner and the keys were all slightly ajar as if someone had just played a chord and the sound was sucked out of the house. There were a couple of dolls on a shelf and they had blank eyes. But the creepiest thing was the photos. Every single photo in the house was either ripped or had the faces scratched out, except for one. It was a wedding photo of a man and a woman. They were smiling and it looked like it was taken recently. My friend and I knew we had to get out of there. We didn't know what was going on, but we didn't want to stick around to find out. As we were making our way out, we noticed something strange. There was a floorboard in one of the bedrooms that sounded hollow when we walked over it, so we stepped on it again. It creaked loudly. Then we heard footsteps from underneath the floorboards. I don't know how to describe what happened next. We can't even agree on what happened. My friend says that he saw a shadow detach itself from the wall and slowly drift across the room. I didn't see anything. I thought my friend was freaking out. He's always been a bit of a scaredy cat. But then the hair on the back of my neck stood up and I felt a cold spot appear directly behind me. When I turned around, I saw a silhouette of a woman in a nightgown standing in the corner of the room. She was tall and thin with long flowing hair. I didn't think it was real, so I tried to walk toward it. It's hard to describe what happened next, but as I got closer, the shape began to take form. I could see the folds in her nightgown and the strands of her long wet hair. But then the room lurched and everything went black. When my vision came back, I was lying on the ground. My friend was kneeling beside me asking if I was okay. I told him that I had seen something, but he didn't believe me. He said that I must have hit my head on the floor and imagined it all. I was a little dazed, so I just went along with it, but I knew what I had seen. As we made our way back to the front door, my friend kept asking me if I was sure I was okay. I told him that I was fine, but I was starting to get freaked out because I couldn't remember how we got out of that bedroom. We finally found the door, and as we stepped outside, my friend took a deep breath and said, "That was insane. Let's never go back there again." I agreed, but I was too distracted to notice that my friend's face had gone white as a sheet. He looked at his watch and said, "What the hell? It's 3:17. His watch was frozen at 3:17. I thought it was pretty funny at the time, but now I wish I hadn't laughed. We both ran out of there as fast as we could and we didn't stop until we were a good distance away. The next day I called my friend to see if he was still freaked out. He picked up the phone and said, "I haven't stopped thinking about it since yesterday. I haven't slept at all. I keep hearing the grandfather clock ticking and sometimes I swear I can hear footsteps in the next room." I told him that I felt the same and that I wanted to go back. He said that he didn't want to go back. He said that if we had woken something up in that house, he didn't want to risk it getting angry. A few days later, I decided to go back alone. I had a feeling that something was waiting for me inside that house and I wanted to see what it was. I got close to the house and I could hear the wind whistling through the broken window frames. As I neared the front door, I could hear a faint ticking coming from inside. It was the grandfather clock. I put my ear to the door and the ticking seemed to get louder. I could also hear what sounded like whispers coming from inside. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded like they were calling my name. I hesitated for a moment, then I opened the door and stepped inside. I walked into the living room and the air was heavy and stale. The grandfather clock was standing in the corner and the hands were moving. It was 3:17 a.m. I stared at the clock, mesmerized by the ticking. The whispers seemed to be coming from inside the clock. I reached out and touched it, but it didn't feel real. It felt like touching a mirage. I walked into the dining room and the meal was still on the table. I could smell the stew that had been simmering on the stove. I reached out and touched the hot plate. I felt a jolt of electricity shoot up my arm and I jerked my hand back. The shadows on the walls seemed to dance and twist as if they had a life of their own. I could feel the eyes of the house boring into me, watching me every move. I walked into the bedroom where I had seen the woman in the nightgown, and I could feel the floorboard creaking beneath my feet. I stood still and listened. I could hear the whispers now. They were coming from behind the wall. I could feel the vibrations of their voices in my bones. I screamed and ran from the house. I don't know if anything followed me, but I didn't dare look back to check. I haven't been back to that house since, but sometimes I hear the ticking in my sleep and I can feel the floorboards creaking beneath me. Sometimes I can even hear the voices, and if I listen closely, I can hear them whispering my name. I don't know what that house did to me, but I will never forget it, and I don't think I want to. One of my favorite parts of this story is the visual horror that the author paints with his words. For example, he describes the clocks as being frozen in a way that implies a suddenness to their stopping, like a liquid metal hand falling in place at 3:17 a.m. He also mentions the dust, which evokes a sense of neglect and abandonment. Additionally, he talks about the way some of the rooms have their own personalities, making it clear that this isn't just a random house, it's a specific place with a specific history. This adds depth to the story and makes it more believable. However, what truly makes this story horrifying is the unexplainable elements, things like the floorboards moving by themselves, the shadow that detached from the wall, and the whispering voices create a sense of dread and anticipation. These moments build suspense and keep the reader on edge, wondering what will happen next. The ambiguity of these events adds to the overall fear factor, leaving the reader to fill in the blanks with their own imagination. Another effective aspect of this story is the use of sensory details. The author describes the smell of the food on the table, the sound of the ticking clock, and the feel of the creaking floorboards. These sensory details immerse the reader in the story and make it feel more real. They also add to the overall creepiness of the house, making it feel like a character of its own. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to leave a like. If you're interested in more content like this, you might enjoy the playlist that I have linked below. Thank you for watching. I'll see you soon.